Hey, habit thrivers. If you're ready to rock your next chapter, this is your place. It's time to live your most fit, fearless, and fabulous life. I believe that our daily habits and routines set the foundation for achieving our dream lives and help us find more passion and clarity with less doubt and uncertainty. So let's get cozy. Grab your planner and your favorite beverage and come along with me on this journey of reclaiming your passions and finding new ones along the way. Welcome to the Habit Thrive podcast, a podcast for women in their me now years. Hi, I'm Lorrie, your host, and each week we come together to create habits, routines, and rituals to reclaim our power and our awesomeness to live our best chapters yet. In this week's episode, I am so pleased to bring you an interview with Dr. Camilla Moore. Dr. Moore has extensive training in mind-body medicine, having studied at the Benson Henry Institute for Mind-Body Medicine at Massachusetts General Hospital, which is affiliated with Harvard Medical School. She is certified to instruct their exclusive stress management and resiliency training program called SMART and positive effect resilience training called the PART program. Dr. Moore's expertise encompasses burnout prevention, mindful leadership, stress reframing, and work-life integration. She offers personalized coaching and group programs designed to help individuals manage stress, improve resilience, and achieve work-life harmony. What I loved about our interview is that we talked about widening our perspective, related especially to stress. In particular, we talked about appreciation. We talked about connections and relationships, and of course, about habits and routines. So wherever you are in this chapter of your life, in pre-retirement, retirement, empty nesting, caregiving, somewhere in between, I know that you will find this discussion, as I did, enlightening, interesting, and most of all, helpful. Enjoy. Welcome, Dr. Moore, to the Habit Thrive podcast. I am so looking forward to our interview today.
I'm looking forward to it too. I think we're going to have a good talk.
We've had the opportunity to be chatting over the last few months. And so being able to come together and do this interview, it is going to be a highlight of my January. And in fact, as I am speaking to January, the theme of the Habit Thrive podcast in January has been rest and reset. So this interview is going to speak to transitions. It's going to speak to rest and resetting transitions, to life transitions. So on that note, I'm going to dive right in and ask you, Dr. Moore, what brought you to the space of stress and burnout, of helping women, of coaching women with issues of stress and burnout?
Well, thanks so much for having me. And so my story involves COVID and kids and everything. So I am trained as a chiropractor. I was a chiropractor in private practice for 16 years. I sold my private practice in 2018, went to work for a big hospital organization here and helped them start their department up there. And then COVID hit. And before I knew it, we were working. And I had a newborn after many years of fertility treatments, which in and of itself is exhausting. So, we're home, we're, isolated from our whole family, had a newborn baby, and both my husband and I were still working and made it through that. But very soon after, just crashed. And I had always been meditation and mindfulness had always been a practice that I had done, had my own meditation coach for many years, and had worked one-on-one with him. So this was a thing that was part of my life, an element that was part of my life, and had the opportunity to get certified through Harvard Medical School with their program that they teach. And that's called Stress Management and Resiliency Training, the SMART program.
Wow.
And so that took, quite a bit of time, and I got certified to teach that. And it really put a lot of things together. My board certifications in lifestyle medicine that we really focus on the basics, the fundamentals of health. So stress management, sleep, nutrition, exercise, community involvement, relationships. And so this really fit together very well. And I had the opportunity to go back into private practice or start a new business. And I decided to just jump headfirst into this space. And it's been great. It's been great.
Well, we are happy that you are in this space
Thanks.
because I would say the more women in particular who are speaking to the issues of stress and burnout in whatever phase of life that we're in. So for those of you who are listening, I know some of you are in your 30s, some in your 40s. Actually, we're all the way up. I'm going to say all the way up into the into the 70s and 80s, and in this listening group, and in all decades of our life, we are potentially dealing with something around stress and burnout. And what I would like to ask about that is, as I talk about those words, how do we know? Like if we are, again, transitioning from a work scenario, sometimes the symptoms of stress and burnout, not always though, and I'm going to turn this over to you, Dr. Moore, in terms of what is stress and burnout, but recognizing it in the work scenario. But again, for a lot of my listeners, and myself included, actually, transitioning into retirement. And so the signs and symptoms, so to speak, of stress, overwhelm, burnout, and what is that continuum of simply feeling overwhelmed and stress to, okay, I'm burnt out and I'm done?
So that this is a great question. One of the things I think would be helpful is to define some of the commonly used terms that are sometimes used interchangeably, but not necessarily accurately. And so we have kind of three different buckets. We have our short-term stress, we have our long-term stress, and we have burnout. So short-term stress is what we mostly think of as our fight or flight, right? We are driving down the road, we get cut off. All of a sudden, like our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up, we start breathing differently, we sweat a little bit. That is a threatening situation and our body responds accordingly. That threat passes, that guy just kind of speeds off and we can go back to our baseline and we recover. That's a normal stress response. That happens. And our stress response is one of the aspects of our being, of our biological being that has allowed us to survive. It serves a purpose. Chronic stress or long-term stress is when you have repeated exposure to that stress and you can't recover, or you have a huge traumatic event. So if you are driving down the road and you get cut off and you start to recover, but you get to work and all of a sudden at work, it is a dumpster fire. You've got this crisis and that crisis, and you're constantly, before you can recover from the last stressful experience, your body's already going into another stressful experience.
Right.
And so what we know is that if you don't have the time and you don't take the time to recover completely from those smaller episodes, that leads to a heightened state where and there's all types of buzzwords around this now, dysregulation of the nervous system and, chronic fight or flight. But really what that means is that the systems in your body, the biological systems in your body are still working and they're still going because they still perceive this to be a threat.
Okay.
And so part of what is and we know that this leads to some very real health complications. We know that chronic stress leads to it can lead to a higher risk of obesity, of type 2 diabetes, of major adverse cardiac events, of sleep disorders. So we know that there are real consequences to not managing stress. Burnout is different. Burnout is more of an environmental issue. That is where you are giving of yourself, you are giving of your time, of something that is just coming from the soul, but is not appreciated, acknowledged, or received. It's not being heard, it's not being seen. So it's a much more personal issue where you are giving and giving and giving, and you are not getting that acknowledgement and that appreciation that we need as human beings to have a reciprocal relationship. So those three things overlap. Right? You can be in an environment, and we see this with burnout. We see this in the workplace, in the language that we use. When you are burning out, some of the symptoms, you asked about the symptoms, some of those symptoms are going to be fatigue, exhaustion and fatigue. You're going to start with maybe some cynicism of like, what's the point of being here? It doesn't matter whether I'm doing this. You're going to really stop caring a lot about what you're doing. And so when we hear this language from folks, when we hear it about like, what's the point? Like, I'm replaceable. And we hear that from employers too, right? You're replaceable. So that is the breeding ground for creating a culture where burnout is going to be very high.
Okay, that word again, appreciation.
Yeah.
That just really, really stood out for me. It's coming across in a lot of the heart alignment, meditation material, everything coming back to the sense of us being able to personally appreciate and to feel appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
So, how, if we were to take that from ourselves personally in again in a workplace scenario, in the scenario of where you are perhaps a caregiver, perhaps a volunteer in the community, well, looking after your family, your kids, your parents.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that those scenarios, there is quite a crossover in terms of the work perhaps that we could do, the skills that we could acquire, the awareness that we could have? So not just in the transition from work to retirement, but just right now, in where whoever is listening and is in a work scenario or is in a I'll say personal scenario, how do we work? And it doesn't have to be just appreciation. You just made me, like, my eyes just lit up. I'm like, yes, that such a powerful word. How can we personally work in that space?
Well, first, I think it's really important not to minimize the importance of that, because I think we can hear these words that we use a lot and we don't necessarily understand the impact that it has. But if we can zoom out a bit here, and just look at where all of this comes from. And we have to understand that at our core, we are biological beings. We are a species where we are, the only way that we have been able to survive this long is through cooperation and through community. And so we not just want that appreciation, but we need to know that we are contributing to a greater good, that we are contributing to something bigger than ourselves. Because if you go back 10,000 years, 15,000 years, the only way that we were able to survive is by working together. And we needed to know that what we were doing mattered to the group as a whole. If you were to isolate one individual from that group, that individual's ability to survive decreased dramatically, because we needed to have people that were looking out for predators, that were gathering food, that were hunting, that were caregiving. We needed to have people that were doing all of those jobs so that we could work together as a community. And we are no different. We need that. That's why one of our pillars of lifestyle medicine is connection and relationships, because we know that giving and receiving within a group, within a community, is paramount to our well-being. Not just to our financial well-being or economic survival, but who we are as people. And so when we look at that with respect to burnout, one of the things that we look at is, what is the culture in which you are working? And so working with managers and directors at that leadership level, and understanding what is the culture that you are creating. Are you creating an environment where everybody can be heard, where people feel like they matter? Are you creating that environment? And so that comes from leadership. And if you don't have that, it can be very difficult to work in that environment, because that's the community that you're in.
What a fantastic answer to that question. And that concept again of zooming out, because it is all in relationship. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we have that feeling of connection. If COVID taught us anything, it was on that importance of connection, and working from the place of perhaps maybe realizing that one of the symptoms of how we're feeling, again, wherever we are in our work scenario, is a lack of appreciation, then if we're recognizing that within ourselves, I know, let's say I'm going to say from a meditation and yoga perspective, yourself as well, being a yoga teacher, that we can recognize and work on this by ourselves, on our own, in our journaling and all of that. As we go out into the world, into the workplace, you really have me thinking about that, thinking, okay, so how do we let, I guess, our feelings be known? How do we, within our own habits and routines, right? Sometimes we're so tired and we're so fatigued. We're just like, okay, I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm just going to keep putting all of this time and this energy. Now, it's quite different when it's a family scenario and a work scenario, for sure. But in that place of recognizing it within us and saying, okay, I'm going to take some steps now to deal with these feelings of whether it's stress or anxiety, or really recognizing that I'm really burnt out because I'm using those phrases. Like, why bother? Nobody is recognizing this, or the thing that happens, right? And you can speak to this definitely more than I can, where our efforts to change, like if you're thinking of a health professional who is helping clients to change, to become healthier, perhaps, or you have teachers who are helping students, or you have family members who are trying to help family members become healthier and to be, out in the community more, or making more relationships. And so we're also making these efforts. And then we get to the point that, again, that phrase, like, why bother? Like nobody, sometimes nobody's listening. Nobody's taking my suggestions, or we're going back and we're doing the same things over and over again, whether it's family, work. I know I kind of jumped all over the place. Does that make sense as a question?
And I think, where you need to start is in an analysis. Like, you have to have some level of objectivity to be able to look at all of the nuances that create your life and be able to start quantifying that. And so there are exercises that we do together, and I can just go over one of them right now, which is a great one, which is, instead of looking at life in terms of responsibilities and tasks, what we do is we look at it in terms of energy. And we say, okay, how much, and you just draw a line down a piece of paper, pen and paper, line up top, line down the middle, 2 columns, pluses on one side for charges and a negative sign on the other side for drains. Okay. And what you're going to do is just start listing, just brain dump everything that comes to mind on whether it gives you energy or whether it takes energy. And so what you start doing there is you start quantifying the aspects of your life. This is an exercise that needs to be done in a quiet space. And you also need to start with compassion, because this is not about measuring your commitment to something. This is not about measuring your love of something, and I'll give you a great example. I have a 4-year-old, love him to death, would die for this kid, would kill for this kid, no question. He is the love of my life and the light of my life. He is definitely a plus, but he is also 4 years old. And that in and of itself is draining. And the reason why it's okay to put your loved ones on both the positive and the negative column is because you have to have that objectivity to recognize that you have to recover from those drains. You have to recover from the 4-year-old days. And so this could be not just children, it could also be if you're caregiving for an aging parent. And this is what I mean when I say it is not a measure of your commitment, it is not a measure of your love, it is not a measure of any of that. But when we are talking about burning out, and burning out is a product of giving more than you are receiving, then what we need to be able to do is see the areas where that is happening. And that doesn't mean that you are going to automatically diminish the time or diminish what you are doing in that negative column, because some of us can't. I can't not be a parent. You can't not caregive to your aging parent or your loved one. That
Yes.
has to happen. But what we can do is also recognize what really gives us energy and start doing more of those and seeing where we can start reworking those ratios to an equation that is much more balanced.
Wow. I love those terms. What charges us and what drains
Drains
us.
us. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. So in that quiet place, first of all, again, I love that. I'm thinking about that as I think about rest and reset places or techniques. I'm wondering whether or not you would do this in the scenario of this is just like I have to do this right now because I am just done. I'm going to do my charging and my draining exercise at the same time. It's kind of speaking to me as something to start with in January, where you're kind of looking at how the year is going to roll out and you are acknowledging what charges you and what drains you and looking for that balance. So to dig even a little deeper on that, if you would also maybe suggest that this is a good time to do this in any time, I would say, but in January, once we have that list, what do we do?
So, so I think I agree with you. I'm not big on New Year's resolutions, but I really love taking these transition times to maybe have an opportunity of transition yourself and a time of reflection to say, we are halfway through our life or, whatever. Where did we, what was the last year like and where do we want to go forward? And so what you want to start doing once you have that list is look to see how balanced it is. You want to say, because we talk about balance as a concept, but not as a practice. And so what we want to do is start taking these ideas and bringing them into our daily life so that they become habits, right? Because if we want different outcomes, we have to change our behavior. And the way we change our behavior is by changing our mindset. And we change our mindset through changing perspective. And we change our perspective when we look at things in a different way. And that's the value of exercises like this, right? So you need to have that continuum if you want the different outcomes. So once you have that list, you're going to look at it and you're going to say, is this balanced out? Or am I, if I'm feeling burnt out, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, there's your answer. Like there's an answer on that page somewhere. Yes. Where you are giving more than you are getting. And so identifying those areas where you really are getting drained and recognizing them. And if you can adapt to it, then adapt to it. If you can decrease it, decrease it. And sometimes that is, if that's a work situation, is there one person in your work? And that's one of the things I love about this exercise. You can take this and apply it to one situation. So you can take this charges and drains and do it just for work. And yes. Put people on the list. You may identify that there's just one person that is so incredibly toxic that that's all it is. So then your question is, what can I do to either minimize and limit my exposure to this person? Or what can I do to start detaching myself emotionally from this person so that their effect on me has decreased? And yes. That's where we talk about things like meditation and mindfulness, is how do we protect that energy that we have? And that is how we do it, is through that practice of mindfulness and meditation so that people can be who they are, but their effect on us is what we control.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So well said. And addressing also the situation again where we're making that decision if we're looking at that list of drains, and sometimes we're still doing what we have to do. This particular person is part of the environment, whether it's work or family, and so changing our perspective to certain mindfulness and different techniques and even awareness. I mean, this is why I love this exercise so much. Because sometimes we're so tired and when you talk about habits, sometimes we're just like literally the habit. Sometimes I talk about the habit of stress. I talk about
Mhm.
the habit of stress sometimes because we're in that place of this is what we know. This is the overwhelm, this is the stress. This is a habit of stress because being outside of that place, sometimes we don't know how to get there, or sometimes it's strangely enough, I heard this years ago, that it is uncomfortable to not be in that place of stress or overwhelm sometimes because we know it so well, and then to try to move out of that place. And I always kind of thought, oh my gosh, that sounds so strange in a sense. But at the same time, when you look at why we put habits into place, they are to, less decisions to be made, and we're able to go through, automatically the things that we do on a daily basis. And so we're going to see how that rolls out until we do a drain and a charge exercise.
Mhm.
Then it's like right in front of us. And then you're making that decision. Okay, I can't decrease this, but I can change my perspective. If we go on the other side of this, and we'll come back to habits and routines, if we're not decreasing the drains as much, and though we've played with, okay, we're going to change some perspective, what could we add to the charging? And I know, you spoke to this around meditation and yoga, or anything that jumps into your mind specifically. It could be something that you do, which would be wonderful, right? That you do specifically to charge, to be on the
So
charge time.
that is going to be different for everyone. And
I,
that's why it's really important to be mindful of this list, because what fills me up is going to be different than what fills you up and other people. If you've reached that point where you really are feeling burnt out, one of the things that you can do is take a look back and see, like, just through the course of your life, over time, what have you had to discard? What did you used to do in your 20s that was super enjoyable that you're not necessarily doing now? Is that, and for me, one of those things that's coming back around is gardening. I grew up on an organic farm, a certified organic farm. And so it was a lot of work. And I didn't necessarily enjoy it, but it was what we did, just for funsies. Both of my parents were in healthcare, but like this was what we did. But now, as a parent and as an adult, I appreciate that time. What you are going to find, I think, if you give yourself the space and the permission to reflect on what you have had to let go of to pursue where you are now, is they're going to circle around creativity, something that where you bring yourself to it. That could be art, painting or drawing. That could be music. That could be cooking. That could be gardening. That could be any number of things. But when we are creative, it gives us that boost to give of ourself to something tangible. And so that feeds that part of us. We can draw a picture and put it on the wall and see it every day. And that's the appreciation. But there is something very special about just creating anything that really helps us feel in the moment, and also that we have something worthwhile to give.
And you just circled back beautifully to our me now years, but you have me thinking about this in a different way. And so this very often in discussions and interviews, even as I've talked about the concept of our me now years and coming back to, right? There's perhaps more time and more space, and that reminder of what brought you joy, and what have you let go of, that perhaps, yeah, there is time and space, but that reminder. So what you just reminded me of is that we don't have to wait. We don't have to wait until our me now years, or as others have said, our wisdom years. And wherever you are in the stage and phase of your life, that especially when you think about that connection to creativity, and the connection to creativity, the connection to other people, the connection to nature, the connection to everything that makes us feel more supported. We're not doing this alone. So my mind you just had me going on this on this again, this reminder that for sure, thinking about that in our me now years, But at the same time, to start to dabble in it now, if you're looking for something that is, because very often as a yoga and meditation teacher and journaler, I come back to that. And you nailed it. For example, meditation, you'll have people say, I get more stress when I meditate. Right? Totally honest, right?
It's not for everyone.
It is. Yeah, it is not for everyone. And so, and sometimes we become more stressed when we are trying to do a technique that, everyone is telling us is good for us and will be having us feel less stress, and we're feeling more, and then we're feeling worse. So really widening, as you say, really widening out the choices, the opportunities, and starting with taking a look back. And reminding yourself of what did bring you joy. That is just beautiful. And it's a great, again, coming into whenever you're listening to this podcast episode. It doesn't have to be in January. I love transitions though. I love it's a perfect opportunity to and it doesn't have to be a journal, everyone. You take out a piece of paper and you're like, okay, this is what I used to do. I came back to cross-country skiing in the last couple of years, which I had let go of for many years. So just making a list. It doesn't have to be, I say, you don't have to set up a big ritual and, candles and all of this. No. Sometimes I say, just take out a piece of paper. And so when you're doing that, again, in that combination of the charging and draining list, what will happen sometimes perhaps is, as you say, not so much resolutions, but kind of intentions and directions and ways that perhaps you want to flow differently through 2025. So many gems, Camilla, in our discussion. Oh my goodness. On that note, though, I want to ask you, is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know, to think about, to reflect on?
Yeah, I think, whenever we are in any sort of transition, it's easy to look at things through a critical lens. And so I would just encourage a softening of that and be very gentle with yourself as you do this, and with others too. Compassion, self-compassion, compassion for others. There's never enough of that, and you can never have too much of it. So as you look back at this, and as you go through those reflections and set intentions for the future, just bring some kindness to that and some softness to it. That's what I would say.
Oh, I love that. Beautiful. This discussion, this chat has been a gift to me. I know, because I know many of the women who are listening, I do know that they will feel the same way. And I also want to say before we end, Dr. Camilla Moore has some great programs, courses, resources, and so don't forget to check out the show notes. I will have the links there for her website, for her social media as well, so that you can connect with Camilla. I would say absolutely have a peek, because I will have to say again that I'm totally impressed with how you've just put everything together. Even on your website, you've inspired me in 2025 to speaking about coming back to things. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So have a awesome week, everyone. Don't forget to, if these exercises really spoke to you, which I know they would have, to have a go at them and enjoy the process. Keep it soft and keep it light. Beautiful. Bye for now, and I will talk to you again next week. If you love this episode, I guarantee you're going to love exploring all the amazing opportunities that await us in reclaiming our awesomeness together. So come on over to my Facebook group, Women's Wellness Community for Women Wanting to Rock Their Me Now Years, or let's connect over on Instagram at Habit Guru 365 and make the Habit Guru podcast your healthy new habit.